Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Musandalamba Milapo, and this is AMR Unplugged. This morning, I'm joined by a colleague of mine, Dr. Yamanya Tembo. She wears many hats, but today we will be referring to her as this policy expert. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
You look very lovely.
Thank you. So do you.
Thank you so
love
much.
that color on you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We typically start our podcast with an icebreaker. And today, as I was preparing the icebreaker, I was thinking back at my own experiences with this question. So I want to find out from you, what's the most surprising antibiotic myth that you've ever come across?
There's so many. I think the most surprising one is that antibiotics can cure headaches.
Really?
Yeah. I once had somebody tell me that.
Wow.
That they often use antibiotics to cure their headaches.
That's very surprising. One myth that I've heard was that people use antibiotics for contraceptive.
Yes, actually, emergency contraceptive.
Oh, really?
Yes, I've heard that one.
It's not a myth, it's actually real.
No, it's a myth.
Yeah, so in light of our discussion today, we'll be talking about AMR policy. The myths that we've just highlighted, what does it reveal about policies surrounding antibiotic use?
I think it shows that we still have a long way to go. That we need to be reaching the people where they are, and in a manner that they understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. And just, unfolding that a little more. When I said policy, I'm sure some listeners may have thought this has nothing to do with me. But this is mainly because antimicrobial resistance can often sound too technical. You would agree with me. But at community level, what does AMR actually look like for everyday life, for an everyday person?
Okay. So maybe I'll start first by unbundling the term policy. Policy is really just like the rules that we live by. Anything can be quote unquote a policy.
Yeah.
So like there's policies about what kind of cars can be on the road.
Right.
Ones that are registered, ones that are, fit to be on the road, all of those things. So anything really that rules or governs the way we work is
Can be a policy.
Is a policy. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when we're talking specifically about AMR, to your question, what does AMR look like, antimicrobial resistance? So AMR in the community, I would say would be infections that don't heal, for instance, or are difficult to treat. And this would mean, it means that you are spending more money to try and treat infections. You are having to use even stronger antibiotics that, again, cost more money. It means, more time off work. So not only are you spending more money, you're earning less money. It also is premature death and disability, meaning like you can get disabled or disfigured because of this untreatable infection. Yeah.
So how would this affect me if, let's say, I'm like a marketeer, a farmer? You've already highlighted some of the things, but if I'm sitting there thinking and listening to this, like how does this really affect me?
So the truth is, I think it's affecting us, whether we can see it or not. And a lot of the times we call AMR the silent pandemic, right?
Yeah.
It's not like the way Ebola was, where you could visibly see people dying, or the way COVID was, we were hearing numbers and all of that. It's a little bit less silent, but it's still very much something that is affecting each and every one of us. For instance, we know HIV now is quite a common disease. And already where we have been seeing, treatment resistance. So before, when we could use the cheapest drugs available, now we're beginning to have to use second line, third line drugs, which are more expensive, harder to come by, have worse side effects, a lot of the times.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. For marketeers, it would be the effects would come down the stream, I think, because now people have less money to spend. They're spending more money on trying to treat the illnesses. So now, they're having fewer customers coming on. For farmers, it would be the same. They have animals. They can't treat their animals with the usual drugs that they used to use. So either one, you have to kill all your animals to prevent them from getting this crazy disease that's floating around in the community, and so you're losing money, or you have to spend even more money to try and get the treatment for your animals. So so I think it's those are kind of the effects that would happen in the community if that people would see if AMR is rampant in a community.
Right. I think you did a good job to highlight, especially the cost implication of and answering directly why it would affect this class of these people that you mentioned, like the marketeers, farmers, and so on and so forth. But to just take it a level up, people like our ward councillors and district officials, why should they care about antimicrobial resistance (AMR) when they're dealing with other things like water, road constructions, school constructions, and even unemployment? Why should that level of people care about AMR?
Yeah. So I think the problem with AMR is in how it affects so many parts of the society, right? So like I had mentioned, the longer that AMR remains unaddressed, the more it affects our nation, our economy. So, for instance, it's been researched that there will be a severe impact on GDP, and by GDP, I just mean that the money that's circulating within the economy, the way that development is able to progress, right? So this means that there's fewer money to spend. You can't actually. There's more unemployment. The government can't realize the taxes that it is able to realize from the people. The people are also suffering because things become more expensive. Money is hard to come by. So those are the things that AMR is causing indirectly, right? And these, I think, are key things that your ward councillors, your members of parliament are trying to address. On top of that, you'll also have this very real thing that, now healthcare even costs even more, right? So things that we take for granted, like moms giving birth safely, become like absolutely dangerous. Things like you having a small cut on your leg can be catastrophic if you get an infection. And I'm sure we've all, like when we were children, have a cut that we that we left unattended, and then it had a little pus. Then we have to go in and clean it. Now imagine having to then be hospitalized for just a tiny little cut. So those are the effects of AMR if they're not addressed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the whole time you were speaking that the reasons of why ward councillors and district officials, policymakers and implementers should care about this, they're so huge and very impactful. But then I'm wondering why there seems to be a gap, in terms of when it comes to AMR policy. And we know that many policies exist on paper. I'm sure there's some policies that exist on around AMR. But from your experience, why do you think there's often a gap between AMR policy and what happens in the communities? Yeah. Why would you say?
So the thing is, I think the our policies are the theory, right? This is what we would like, how we would like things to happen. But often the policy is being implemented in real life, and real life is messy, right? So it doesn't always go to plan. So even if your policy is really good, there's the lived realities that we have to face. So one big thing I think is obvious. We don't have all the money that we want, that we need to implement these policies the way we want to implement them. So, we don't have enough staff in the hospitals. We don't have enough commodities that make infection prevention really easy. There are not enough hospitals or clinics close to where people live. People in Zambia still have to travel very long.
That's true. Yeah.
And in Africa generally, they still have to travel very long, very far to get healthcare. And now you're looking at, this person is now having to weigh whether they miss work or they miss a whole day of planting, which is how they sustain their family. To go and then access healthcare, only to be told that the hospital doesn't have medications, and so they have so they would rather then go and easily go to the neighbor and get drugs from their neighbor, or share medicines with somebody, or stockpile so that they can, in the eventuality that they have this disease at some other point in time, they use it. So those are some of the things. There's many other issues, I think, as well. If we look at how AMR is also a cross-sector thing, and everybody has different priorities. So health will have their own priority. Finance will have their own priorities. They're trying to get money into the country. The environment will also have their own priority. Agriculture also have their own priorities. And so it's difficult to speak across these different areas, even though they are intertwined and they all contribute to AMR. It's very difficult to bring them together and agree on one pathway because they all have their own priorities.
So interesting, everything that you just mentioned. And it makes me think about just how policy is shaped. Typically, the AMR policies, that at least the ones that I've come across, they often address like they come from the global perspective, so to say. But what would it look like if AMR policy started from the community realities, or had a reflection of the community realities as opposed to global targets? What would that look like?
That's a good question. And yeah, a lot of the times, leaders go and discuss, with other leaders, and every context is different. So it's very difficult to reflect all the different contexts
I'm sure,
in a target. And so I think if country policies started from the ground, I think they would be practical instead of looking at targets. And by practical, I mean that it would start with, why is Vana Walia actually going to buy medicine from, the kiosk down the road instead of going to the clinic? What's the issue there? And how can we solve that issue first? Because not until you solve that issue will you get Wanawalia to stop going to the kiosk, right? It's also like, what is causing infections in the first place in these communities, right? People don't have water, easy access to clean water. People don't have access to good sanitation and hygiene. So what is it how can we provide these basic necessities for our people so that they don't end up having infections in the first place?
Right.
I think that would be the beginning of the priorities of the policies. That's where they would start. A people-centered AMR policy doesn't start with telling people you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. It starts with first understanding the people where they are, and then fixing that problem so that that problem doesn't exist, doesn't force them to do the wrong thing. It makes the good choice the easy choice and not the other way around.
Yeah. I chuckled a bit when you were speaking because our audience may not have understood Banabwalia. So Banabwalia is simply Walia's mother in one of our local dialects. And you just ended by talking about how you highlighted the community in your response, and it makes me wonder, if the community can influence AMR policy, is this even possible that the community can influence policy?
Absolutely.
And how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think communities have been, influencing policy, whether they know it or not. UNAID has written a fantastic report about the extent of community and how they extent of community involvement and how they influenced HIV and HIV treatment. And it's a fantastic read. And it talks about how communities galvanized and made it impossible for our leadership to ignore the problem and ignore their needs. And that is what communities need to do. They need to make it impossible for politicians and their leadership to ignore what they need. And this is coming up with practical asks. This is, making it so that you're constantly in your ward councillor's face, in your member of parliament's face, telling them what you need, what the things are that you are experiencing in your community are. So things like, for instance, in Africa, across of Africa, and this is not just in Zambia, we're still, struggling with cholera. Every year there are outbreaks. What is it that we need? We need clean water and sanitation. And until that is realized, we'll keep having those issues. So people need to galvanize themselves, to advocate for these things. And I think this is also where some of our organizations come in play. Organizations like React Africa. There are also, youth-led organizations in the community.
Yeah.
AAA in Zambia, AJRAM in Burkina Faso. There's many examples anyway of different organizations working at different levels to advocate for these things. And the people in the communities need to come alongside those, organizations to make their demands known to their leadership.
Yeah, I hear you. And I really do agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes what we hear and what we see from our policymakers is that they are juggling many other priorities. Like we mentioned, there's schools, there's unemployment, there's many other things on the plate for them.
Mm-hmm.
So how can AMR be framed in a way that it connects to issues that they already care about, like maternal health, food security, and also economic growth? How do we make it something relevant on their plate?
Good question. And I think I think I've even alluded to it previously, but I think making it very clear would help here. And the issue with AMR is that it multiplies the problem.
Yes.
It's a multiplier. And so things like maternal health become so much harder to achieve when AMR is in the mix. So, for instance, AMR, I think maternal health has been a key issue for a very long time in African countries. And we are really trying our best to bring down the numbers of maternal deaths. Not only that, I think even neonatal infections. And you cannot bring down maternal deaths if you have infections that are persisting within, maternal health spaces, right? That women who are giving birth are dealing with. And so therein lies your AMR. The interventions for AMR are preventative for things that would affect maternal health. So we're talking about quality of care. Having your infection prevention but materials and commodities available and readily accessible in facilities, having people educated about it as well. All of these things are things that we need to address for AMR, and at the same time, we'll also address maternal health. The same thing, I think, goes for, for the economy, for instance, right? We want people who are young, people who are thriving in the economy to push the economy forward. AMR causes premature deaths, it causes prolonged illness. All of these affect the way that economies run. So the fewer people that you have who are healthy enough to, contribute to the economy, the worse it is for a country. So by addressing AMR, we are also ensuring that they're healthy people to drive the economy forward. I think the same thing can be talked about when we come to agriculture.
I agree. But let's talk ownership. We talked earlier in our conversation about the global targets versus the realities in the communities. Um, how can African policymakers just take ownership of AMR policy, locally, basically? Yeah.
So I think it starts with the way we govern and the accountability that we have in this accountability systems that we have in place, which I think will need to be strengthened. And one practical way that leaders can take ownership of this is by putting their money where their mouth is.
It's not as easy.
Yeah, it's not as easy,
Yeah.
but I think it starts in small ways. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to have all the money at one go. It starts in small, practical ways, incremental steps that we need to take. So having even ensuring that there is, for instance, infection prevention that is a minimum standard of infection prevention that we say that every single health facility needs to have is a starting point, and ensuring that we actually hold our leadership accountable for those standards that we set. We can't then go backwards and say, oh no, because we don't have money. No, we need to put a hard and fast rule to say this is the standard and this is the standard that we're going to uphold, and then put systems in place to ensure that we uphold those systems. I think also another way that leaders can take ownership is also, I think, working with the people in the community, and people as well, ensuring that they hold their leaders accountable.
Yeah.
Because only when we hold our leaders accountable can they then deliver on the promises that they are making us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well
So I
put.
think those are the
Yeah, thank you so much for that very wholesome response to how African policymakers can take ownership of AMR policy. And so just as we are fast approaching our end, I think we have already underscored the importance of policymakers in our fight on antimicrobial resistance. And I know as an organization, React Africa, we have been engaging policymakers and also clerks as well. You have been doing such a good job with that, by the way.
Thank you.
But ultimately, why would you say it is critical for policymakers to be engaged in addressing antimicrobial resistance? I know we've painted the entire picture, but in your own words, why would you say this is critical?
So it's critical because they are the rule makers. We started off this episode by talking about how policies are all the rules that govern the way we work. And they're the ones who make the rules that set the tone.
That's right.
For the country. So they become the key people then to involve, the key people to talk to help understand why this is really important. Not only are they the rule makers, they are the ones who decide where what money goes. Yeah. So they're the holders of the purse strings. And when they make a decision that, yes, we'll fund this and no, we won't fund this, that again is very critical. So again, we need to engage them to help them to see how AMR, for instance, addressing AMR is actually an investment in the economy. It's the investment in people's health, and it's really key for the country to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good answer. Thank you so much for that. And just in closing, if by chance there was a policymaker watching this particular episode, you can even look straight into the camera as you address them. What's that one message that you would leave for the policymaker from the perspective of the community about AMR? Like, if you would be directly sitting with a policymaker in this room, what would you tell them?
Prevention is better than cure. And I would say, give us the basics. That's all we are asking for, the basics, right? We want access to clean water at our taps, within our yards. That's what we want. We want access to healthcare within walking distance. We want access to quality care. We want, access to diagnostics. We don't want to go to a health facility only to be told, oh, we can't do this test today. You have to come back tomorrow. That's not what we want. We want to be able to access the kind of care that we need when we need it, the minute that we need it. And that is what's going to solve this problem. And it doesn't just solve the problem of AMR, it solves a whole other host of issues that we are trying to grapple with in the community, in our country. The basics, that's what we want.
Dr. Yamanya Tembo is calling for the basics. Prevention is better than cure. Thank you so much, Doc, for just taking us through just the wealth of knowledge that you have and that you have brought to this conversation. I certainly have learnt a lot on this particular episode, and really grateful for the time that you have taken to come and sit with us here on AMR Unplugged.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah. And thank you so much as well for staying up to the end of this podcast. This has been AMR Unplugged. Be sure that you're following us on our social media pages on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We are React Africa, and that's RunTube on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.